Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our core plays, this time the Open Championship, heading across the pond for our final major of the year. We've got ourselves Royal Liverpool, an absolute gem of a venue, and of course all the world's best teamed it up, so what's there not to love out there? Here in this video, going to take a look at the top end of the Draftkings pricing and bring you 4 of my top GPP plays, as well as 4 players that I'm taking outright. So doing a deep dive there at the top end of the board and bringing you 4 of those studs that I think you might want to rally behind this week for one reason or another. So a ton to talk about. Let's go ahead and start it off with a look at Royal Liverpool and some of my key stats and what I'm looking at this week to make these top end plays. Fortunately for us, we've seen Royal Liverpool a few times, not over the last 5-6 years, but in 2006 when Tiger won, and then 2014 when Rory won. Both of those gave us a pretty good idea of what Royal Liverpool is going to look like, albeit a few changes were made here before 2023. So 2020, Ebert came in, did a little bit of a renovation to the course, took hole number 10, changed it from a par 5 to a par 4. They also have a new hole at hole number 17, which is going to be one of the more difficult par 3s on property. So it's going to be a little bit different this time around, but the other 16 holes are pretty much the exact same. So what we know about the golf course is that there's going to be a lot of laying up off the tee. So Tiger, when he won, he's famous for going out there and only hitting one driver. When Rory McIlroy won, he hit driver less than 50% of the time, and was also top 20 in the field in driving accuracy, which if you know Rory's game, you know just how atypical that is for somebody of his driving distance. When you take a look at the approach distributions, it's a lot of long iron shots because of how much players are laying up off the tee. Just about 7,400 yards, so it's not like every par 4 should require a 175 to 200 yard iron shot, but even some of the middle, let's say like to 450, maybe even less than 450 yard par 4s, you're going to see that from a few players. Out there, there are your usual links style pop bunkers over there in this part of the country. You also have a few fescue areas, a few burns, actually internal OB on like 8 or 9 holes out there. So it's not your typical wide open link setup, right? There's a ton of ticking time bombs to be had, and if you get into any of those traps, it could be your golf tournament over in just one hole. So that's why Tiger was so conservative out there. It's why guys like Rory McIlroy, especially on some of the more dangerous holes, took that conservative approach. So when you're looking at off the tee, I think you should consider some of the shorter positional tracks when you're looking at those off the tee metrics, like a Harbor Town, because it's a completely different game, right? Going out there, just trying to prioritize position over distance, and that's going to reflect a huge discrepancy when you look at off the tee. I'm still looking at distance because it is a little bit more receptive this time around. They've gotten a ton of rain in the area, just like they did over there for the Scottish Open. So expect this course to perhaps play a little bit longer this time around, and perhaps the fairways to hold just a little bit more. So, I prefaced it with all the laying up and whatnot. A lot of players are going to take that avenue, but some of the longer guys might hit driver a little bit more this time around, just because the fairways should be a little bit more receptive this time, right? I don't think it's going to be a drastic difference. I don't think everyone's going to be hitting drivers all of a sudden, but compared to 2014, maybe 2006, especially with the upgrades in technology, the increases in driving distance, I would be shocked if there weren't more drivers hit this time around. So that's worth noting. Michael Kim also mentioned that after his practice round today. Looking at the approach numbers, your long irons are what I'm weighing a little bit more than most, especially that 175 to 200, that 200 to 225 yard range is going to be extremely important. You have long par 3s, you've got a lot of long iron shots into par 4s. When you miss, you're going to be penalized, as you are at most of these Open Championship courses. Your putting is maybe a little bit less important this week than most, but yeah, it's still in the model. You've got some slow bent POA greens with a fescue base to worry about. Around the green, I'm looking at shots gained around the green off the fairway cut. So everything on this link style setup is shaved off around the green. That means when you miss a green, right, it's not that deep rough like you had it like an Oak Hill or a US Open type of setup most of the time, where balls are going to get held up, right? When you miss, you're only missing by a yard or two most of the time, and your around the green shots aren't very difficult. They're all very similar too, right? They don't require very much creativity. At this kind of golf course, link style, everything's shaved off. You have a lot of those bunkers around the green. Your shots are a lot more difficult and require a lot more creativity. So I think if you're just looking at shots gained around the green, you might not be getting the full picture there, so consider that. In terms of shots gained at Open Championships, I think that's helpful. This is a very typical open course, I would say. Sand save percentage, shots gained in windy conditions. A little bit early to look at the weather forecast, but does look for at least 2 days to be relatively windy. And then in terms of your comp course history, maybe a little bit surprising to some, but Kiawah Island, I think with the added length, with how wet the golf course is going to play, you're going to see it play a little bit longer this time. I have got the Seaside course for the RSM Classic. That's mostly because we have a large sample for players on the PGA Tour there, so I'm taking a look at that track. Carnoustie, I think, is a pretty good example. It's a similar length, same par 71 kind of track, same kind of wide open link setup, so I think there's a lot of comparisons. TPC Sawgrass, you've seen a lot of crossover success between the two golf tournaments. And then Muirfield, kind of like Carnoustie, is your prototypical, very similar kind of link setup. So just when you ask players to compare Royal Liverpool to some of the other Open Championship courses that you've played, I've heard Phil mention Muirfield. I've heard a few players mention Carnoustie, albeit maybe a little bit easier version of Carnoustie than what we've seen for some of those Opens. But all leaderboards worth looking at for perhaps a little bit of that crossover. All right, we were able to have a lot of fun last week with DFS and outrights, as we had 2 of these core picks in contention last week. Of course, Rory came through, got us that dub, helped us out in DFS, and cashed us that outright. Let's go ahead, hop into the board, and get it done for this week too, right? Let's make it fun. Good sweat for us for all 4 days. So number 1, top play up top, Jon Rahm. Mean, good old angry, intimidating, scary Jon Rahm. He's $11,200. That is expensive as ever living hell. And as of now, with some early ownership projections, it's looking like he's going to be the lowest owned option up here. Either him, maybe a Cam Smith is a little bit lower owned, which would definitely be the prudent thing, right? I mean, Jon Rahm being the lowest owned option up here would be absolutely ludicrous. And I know that Rory is your last champion at Royal Liverpool, is coming in off the win. Thank you, Rory, right out there for those units. But Jon Rahm just fits this type of track. It feels like he's being completely slept on, which is just as outrageous as him being the lowest owned player in this range, and fits this golf course to a T. Let me remind you, right? Off the tee distance, I think might play a huge factor this year. I think it's going to play a lot longer than maybe what we've seen in years past. If that's going to be the case, then guys like Jon Rahm are going to be the nuts sort of players. Like guys that can hit it long and hit fairways. He's also a player that tends to elevate his game at these elite tier events, and it wouldn't surprise me at all for him to go out there and take this thing home, particularly as your 3rd betting favorite at this point. So I was able to catch him as soon as the bets dropped at 11-1, so that was one of the better numbers you can get. I think he's still right around there at this point. I don't know if he's gone up or down from there, but I hammered him right away, and do not regret my decision whatsoever. He's world's best player in my opinion, especially when he has his game, for whatever reason, has been a little bit off of late, right? Missed the cut at the Travelers, has not played on the PGA Tour since then, T10 at the US Open, right? So that was maybe an average performance at best for Jon Rahm, right? It's nothing that he would write home about or anything like that, especially because, right, you had 2nd, 3rd, 4th place finishers priced right around him there. That doesn't help you out for DFS. But I think because of that, right, is why we're getting the low ownership. And I think people would be a little bit crazy not to play Jon Rahm here. So first off the tee, right, still gaining of late. Has been a little bit inaccurate, so he's not gaining close to stroke per round like he does most of the time, but still gaining prolifically off the tee, gaining over a stroke per round on approach. That includes 2 events of him gaining over 8 strokes in a single event over his last 5 or 6 starts, which is no one else in the field can say that, right? He just pops with his irons unlike many other players can. He's also a player that can hit that driving iron off the tee, does it most weeks on tour anyways. At this sort of track rate, it's not like he's bringing a shot out of the bag that he doesn't already hit, right? Some of these players will never lay up off the tee, right? Don't even have a driving iron in the bag, right? Like a Rory had to introduce it last week at the Scottish Open. Good thing he did, right? For that shot on 18, he needed it for that shot on 18 into that wind. Jon Rahm, though, very used to hitting those kind of shots. Wins Rolex Series events at similar golf courses over here on the DP World Tour. Is an international player that has grown up playing in the wind. These same windswept kind of golf courses over on this side of the pond. I have no question marks there. I know it's been a little bit scratchy of late. I know he has that missed cut in there. I'm not worried about it. This is a competitor. Like I said, it's angry, intimidating Jon Rahm, who goes out there and is just a destroyer of worlds out there, and it feels like he's due. to go out there and show the world who he is. So I stand on that rock as he's the best player in the world. I've said that for like 2 years at this point. I've been very very firm in that argument for the last 2 years that he's clearly the world's best player. If you were to get all these guys in contention, let's say the top like 10, 12 players in the field, right? You put them all in contention, Jon Rahm would be by far the one that I'm taking. I'd be like, okay, yeah, he's got like a 30-40% chance to win. Everyone else would give like a 5 to 10% chance to win at the very most. Even guys like Rory Scotty, right? Like Rory, I mean, God, she's a choker. We know that. Right? Last week, not so much when he was playing from behind. That was nice, right? You get him out from behind, he's okay, but not when he's ahead. I mean, Scotty Scheffler, right, can't make a putt for his life. Like literally, if anyone up top, even with the form up there, I'd want Jon Rahm. So I'm taking him this week. I'm not overthinking it. I don't think I have to convince you all that much on that. And the fact that we're getting him at low ownership makes him all that much sweeter. The event history, right? We look at how he's done in Opens. It's been good, right? He's missed 1 cut out of his last 5. He's got a T3, T11 finish, a couple just meh finishes, including last year. There in 2017 too with a T44 finish. But yeah, that T3 finish, just improve on that a little bit, get us that dub, and we'd be riding into the sunset. So that's what I'm hoping happens this time around. Next up, we've got Brooks Koepka, who's a just major champion this year. Obviously, second place at Augusta. Even last time out at the U.S. Open really wasn't all that bad, right? What did he finish at the U.S. Open? Just, what, T17? And we're worried about him, right? That was his last finish in major championship golf. On Liv, hasn't quite been as sharp as he was going into those major victories, or even when he was going into Augusta, not playing as sharp as then, but still consistently top 10ing pretty much every single week. He pretty much has that 6-7 under par round every single Liv event. Lives about 2-3 under par for the other 2 rounds, and usually just like I said, just top 10 machine. 500K an event out there for Liv. I'm sure he's just a living ATM at this point. And in major championships, I play Brooks Koepka. That's a role that I've lived by for my entire PGA DFS career. It has paid off unbelievably well, right? Even when he doesn't win, the guy is usually finishing top 5, top 10 in majors. And like I said, that T17 finish is literally like one of the worst finishes that you're going to get from Brooks, at least when he's healthy, right? Out there in these major championships. The real X factor for me is that he's being slept on. Like, people are playing Cam Smith, right, coming off the Liv win, right? Obviously, defending champion at the Open Championship. People are going to play these top 3 players. Hell, people are even playing guys like Xander and Victor this week in Cantlay, right? They're even getting their attention. Hell, Rickie, we're going to talk about here soon. So it's not like anyone in this range is being completely overlooked. Brooks, though, I have as one of the lower, if not like middle-ly owned players, and I think that's a huge mistake. The thing that's the huge X factor that makes me like him a little bit more than I think most people is his experience on link-style golf courses that no one seems to give him credit for. He came up on the Challenge Tour, played, I believe, a season and a half on the DP World Tour, has plenty of wins on the Challenge and DP World Tour to boot, before coming over here to America to play on the PGA Tour, and then obviously moving over there to the Live Tour eventually. So he's played in pretty much every tour out there at this point, except for the Corn Ferry, and has experience at these type of tracks. Right? He has wins at these type of tracks in his career, though he's a little bit removed from those. You know, they were a long time ago for Brooks Koepka. You never lose that experience. You know how to play it, right? And I'll remind you, my number 1 comp course, right? We said it's going to play a little bit longer. Kiawah Island, right? It's a link style setup, be it in America, right? A Pete Dye golf course that has a ton of wind. It's completely exposed, similar type of long natural grass, waste bunkers guarding a lot of the fairways out there. And he finished second to Phil Mickelson. I saw that one in person out there. It was an absolute masterclass by Phil. But if it weren't for good old Phil, it would have been Brooks Koepka's, but he'd have 6 major championships at this point and another PGA championship to boot. It's a similar type of track. We get him at a narrative that I don't think a lot of people are considering with that experience on the Challenge and PGA Tour. I absolutely love him for this golf tournament. He's my favorite outright, got him at 20-1, so a lot of value to be had there. I believe you can still get that even at like DraftKings at this point. They're at 20-1. In terms of recent form, he's number 2 in the field. I mean, gaining 3.2 strokes per round. That includes even some shitty rounds over there for the PGA Tour. Actually, no, they're all major championship rounds now that we've got in there for. So in major championships, gaining 3.2 strokes per round. you can't beat that. No one in the field can come even close to saying that sort of thing. So love him there, even at that sort of price tag, even at that sort of outright number. And in terms of outright betting value, I do think he's the best value on the entire board, regardless of price. Before we hop into our last two plays, I'll remind you guys, check out my Patreon page if you want to be able to download these spreadsheets for yourself. Of course, on there, everything that's blacked out won't be, right? You'll have all my modeling on there, projections, cut rates. We'll have projected ownership and my player pool as the week goes on. And over here, all of my key stats have the weightings on there. So if you want to go out there, replicate my model on whatever site you're going out there using an optimizer on, you can do so. You can just take a look at how I'm weighting things, right? Maybe to go out there and adjust your model accordingly, whatever you want to do with that, right? All of that to help you research, get after your PGA DFS, go out there, take some outright bets too, right? It's what I use to go out there and make these picks every week. What we did to go out there, pick Rory last week, had about 2.5x week for ROI and DFS. Obviously, pretty good week for props there too, with 3 of the 4 days being profitable. This is the exact sort of research that I use, so I think it'll be super helpful for you guys out there too. So $10 a month, link is down below. Check it out if you haven't already. Now for our last two plays. So first off, we got Rickie Fowler. Promised you we'd get to him at some point. For whatever reason, I thought he would be mega chalk. He still might be, right? It's Monday, right? So don't get me wrong, a lot could change here in Rickie Fowler. The ownership numbers on him early in the week are disrespectful. Like, I thought he'd be 25% owned this week because he finished second to Rory McIlroy here in 2014. So I thought people would run with that narrative. Obviously had the win at the Rocket Mortgage. And last week, I know it wasn't amazing, but at least he made the cut at this golf tournament. At Open Championships over the last 5-6 years has been pretty decent too, right? Is 4 for 4 for making cuts, including a T6 finish when he was quote unquote playing poorly, right? During those years of his career. I mean, just count me in on Rickie Fowler. He fits this golf course to a T. He's played it off the tee here, kind of knows what to expect from that end. Went out there, hit a bunch of driving irons, is very used to the wind. Being from South Florida, like somebody like myself, I see him as being a perfect course fit here. And if he's going to be low owned, right, for DFS, he's one of my favorite plays, period, on the slate. So I think from the outright betting angle, it's maybe not the best value, right? I think that the outright number on Brooks has a lot more value to it. I'm still betting Rickie because I think he's very viable to go out there and win this week. But for DFS is where I think Rickie is the most valuable this week. If the ownership number is going to be sub 10%, that's what I'm seeing right now with some of my early projections. That is going to just be one of the nuts plays this week. So hopefully me talking him up doesn't get him there to 15-20%. Me doing it myself is not going to do it. But if we start to get every tout pointing out Rickie Fowler as a low-owned, great GPP play, well, don't be surprised if he's like 20-25% owned by the time we get to Wednesday. So I like him at $9,800. He's what, number 8 in recent form, number 3 for your total model ranking. Checks all of the boxes that we're looking for. In terms of your recent form metrics, it's worth looking at with Brooks. I mean, the guy is just consistently gaining across the board. We don't have shots gained metrics for all the golf tournaments he's played, unfortunately. Down here with Rickie, where you at? Good old BDR. Gaining 1.1 strokes per round approach, a stroke per round with the putter, gaining around the green, pretty decent off the tee. Perfect. That is the prototypical Rickie Fowler performance. So like I'm there at $9,800. Hopefully the ownership stays in check. Finally, our last play going to be Tony Finau, and the ownership for Tony Finau is actually higher than what it is for Rickie Fowler, which is just mind-boggling for me, considering that, you know, Rickie has a win, right, over his last few starts, and Tony Finau has not been very good, right? He's missed cut, T45, T32 finish over there at the US Open. The shots gained metrics have kind of been off too, right? You can see he's gaining across the board, but nothing crazy tee to green, right? Just about a stroke per round, which is lower than his baseline for his career, and then losing with the putter, which is kind of his MO, right? Let's not get thrown off too much by that. But yeah, definitely not playing his best golf. So I'm not getting there for recent form. For me, it's because he's played well at Open Championships. He's a really good off the tee player, right? He's long off the tee, which I think is going to help him this week. And for whatever reason, likes an Open Championship setup. If we take a look at the event history here for Tony Finau, T28, T15 third, T9, T27 finish. So all made cuts in all top 28 finishes. I mean, that's crazy. T3, T9 finishes are, those are GPP viable plays, right, out there at this kind of price tag. Even T15 is probably a GPP viable play, right, at $8,200. And I know I got a little bit of ownership going to Tony Finau right now, but it's not crazy. He's not in that 15 to 20% range yet. And when conditions get windy, if we get a really windy version of this golf tournament, I like Tony Finau even more. So the outright number is fantastic. From that angle, I really like him this week, kind of like a Brooks Koepka. And in GPPs, as long as the ownership doesn't get crazy, I'd say like 15% is probably the cutoff line for me. Sub 15% ownership, and I'm going to be a huge buyer here, right? I know the form's not great, but if we zoom out a little bit, right, give him a little bit of leeway here, right? The tee to green numbers improve, gets a little bit better with the putter. So across the board, you see slight improvements. And considering the history, not this course, but I guess it just Open Championships in general, I think he fits this kind of golf, right? He's got the heavy ball flight, kind of like a Brooks Koepka, to pierce through the wind. That's kind of I'd say, except for Rickie Fowler, something that all these golfers have, is they have that real heavy penetrating ball flight. And if we get a nasty, windy version of the Open Championship, that's what you're going to want to have there for Saturday, Sunday. So way too early to know on that end how the weather is going to look over that end, 5-6 days from now. But I like him at these type of setups. I think that Royal Liverpool could work for somebody like a Tony Finau, where putting and putting and then around the green play. Around the green play, we're still looking at, especially because it's a major championship, but putting, definitely less important this week, right? So the fact that he's losing, right, that 0.7 strokes per round, or that 0.4 strokes per round over the last 36 rounds, I don't know if I worry about it as much at this golf course, right? And I guess you could say the same thing about Brooks, right? You can be a little bit shaky with the putter from round to round. I don't know if it's as big of a deal at this sort of golf course that has the slow greens, where you're not going to have a bunch of 4 or 5 footers coming back. So like the setup for all 4 of these players. For DFS, hopefully we get low ownership on Tony Finau. I guess with Rickie, kind of worried about the ownership too, but Brooks Koepka, Jon Rahm should be relatively low-owned pivots we can get to, and hopefully see yourselves at some of the top of those GPPs. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the core plays this week. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also go ahead and comment down below who you're going out there and betting for an outright this week. Just give me your top outright. For me, I told you it's Brooks Koepka in terms of value out there. Got him at plus 200, plus 2,000, plus 200 value, right? What am I talking about out there? 20 to 1. And let me know what you guys are taking down there. And also, keep an eye for the rest of my content this week. We're going to have value plays dropping tomorrow. We'll have feeds and sleepers on Wednesday, a prop show at some point, going over some of the value on that end. And of course, our premiere live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, going through all of your questions, a last second look at the weather, look at the chalk, some ownership notes, and of course, just anything that you need to know heading into the weekend to go out there and have yourself a week. I'll have a link down in the description of this video to the live stream whenever I get that link up. Also, there's a link to the community contest down there. So in there, you can enter, play against the rest of the community, play for some bragging rights, a little bit of cash there too. And if you want your lineup reviewed, make sure you get in there so I can take a look at it on that end. But until then, guys, I appreciate all the support here on the channel. Best of luck with your outrights, with all of your DFS lineups for this week, and let's get this cash.